Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Riley McManus. A Safer Supply pilot program was announced today in Thunder Bay. Norwest Community Health Centers will be providing prescription pharmaceuticals to regular opiate users, alongside other forms of health care, social services. They hope the program will save lives and make the city safer for all. Lee Noonan has more.
The goal of the program is to replace toxic opioids off the street with prescription hydromorphone and reduce the risk of overdose or death by drug toxicity. Anyone who is currently using opiates on a daily basis is eligible to participate. Norwest Community Health Centers received $1.5 million in federal funding for the pilot, which will run for about a year. Jennifer Lawrence, Director of Health Services for Norwest, says the need in the city is so great they do not expect they'll be able to meet it.
We saw more overdoses in the first 6 months of this year than we saw in the entire year last year. That's pretty significant. We also see more overdoses that require more of the overdoses we see require more naloxone intervention, more medical intervention, and we are having to call EMS more often for overdoses.
Participants will also have access to a wide range of other health care and social services through the program. Cynthia Olson, the city's drug strategy lead, calls the program a beacon of hope, saying it will mean everything to the city as it continues to face an opioid crisis.
So we are hoping that this will save lives. This will actually mean that individuals will have a regulated, known dose. They will be well connected to services, and be able to have some stability. And we're hoping that demonstrates that these types of programs are really critical.
In addition to the people directly helped through the program, both Olson and Lawrence say they expect to see a benefit to the city as a whole, as some of the burden is lifted from local emergency services.
Improved health outcomes, better overall well-being, improved social functioning, less involvement with crime, and less burden on the justice and emergency response services.
By the end of the pilot, Lawrence expects dozens of participants to have been helped, and she hopes to establish Safer Supply as a permanent service available in the community. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
A driver is facing criminal charges after a pedestrian was struck and killed by a sedan at the intersection of Highway 1117 and Highway 587 in Shunya. It happened at about 10 o'clock Saturday night. The victim's identity is being withheld pending notification of next of kin. The driver of the vehicle suffered minor injuries and is charged with operation of a vehicle causing death. One lane of the highway was temporarily closed as OPP investigated the fatal collision. A murder trial will get underway tomorrow at the Thunder Bay Courthouse for a woman accused of killing an 11-year-old boy. The tragic incident occurred at a home on West Victoria Avenue in the early morning hours of New Year's Day 2020. Along with the death of the boy, City Police also investigated an assault on a 59-year-old man at the residence. The suspect, Courtney Marie LaBelle, was arrested soon afterwards. Today in court, the 37-year-old woman pleaded not guilty to 1 count of second-degree murder and 1 count of aggravated assault. Jury selection was carried out throughout the day, and the trial is scheduled to last 3 weeks. A publication ban is in effect for some details surrounding the case. The saga of the James Whalen tug has reached its latest stage, as the historic vessel is now resting in a dry dock at a temporary storage location, where it'll stay for up to 2 years. Late Friday evening, the vessel, built in 1905, was successfully lifted onto the Patterson Dock. That dock is right next to the James Street Swing Bridge, which was built just a few years after the Whalen in 1909. Corey Halverson, manager of City Parks and Open Spaces, says everything went as planned with the final transfer of the tug from the barge onto the dock. The city will spend the next year or two exploring the next stages, but for now, the tug will remain in this spot, resting safely on its cribbing.
It's in a fenced, secure site, so there is no general public access to it, and the vessel can't be accessed from the ground without some sort of a lift to do so safely.
Halverson says the immediate priority will be assessing the structural integrity of the 117-year-old vessel, which was found to have a hole in its hull. Options for a new location for the James Whalen will be explored over the winter. Halverson says everything is on the table, including the Lakehead Transportation Museum or returning the tug to the Cam River Heritage Park with a different type of installation. A big decision for Thunder Bay City Council tonight as they're asked to award a $680,000 tender for renovations to the EMS headquarters on Junot Avenue. If approved by Council, the work would be awarded to Whitehall Contractors. The renovations would expand 2 locker rooms and create extra space on the 2nd floor for the paramedicine program. EMS Chief Wayne Gates explains the importance of carrying out the work.
As I'm sure most people are aware, our service has been growing quite a bit in the last few years, and now we've reached a point where we need to do some major renovations here at Junot to really keep up with the demand of the service we're providing out there in the community.
Also at City Hall tonight, Council will vote on whether to continue the free menstrual product program. The pilot was launched last year and ensured that menstrual products be available free of charge in city facilities, including libraries, arenas, stadiums, and more. Unions representing public sector workers in Ontario are in court, fighting against the Ford government's controversial Bill 124. They say the bill, which caps wage increases, is unconstitutional. The case will be heard over the next 10 days. Siobhan Morse explains.
With the Ontario government standing firm on legislation that caps public sector wage increases at 1%,
we are here today in the next step of our legal challenge against Bill 124.
Over 10 days, a collection of unions will argue that bill is unconstitutional. OPSU says it's creating 2 tiers of workers.
Some of whom have the benefit of full and fair collective bargaining as guaranteed under Section 2D of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, otherwise known as freedom of association.
The province's position is that the Charter doesn't guarantee unlimited annual raises. It also argues unions can still push for things like job security and benefits.
This unconstitutional, punitive bill has Ontario public sector workers bargaining with one hand tied behind our backs.
With tens of thousands of workers in healthcare and education affected, unions argue this bill is also sexist.
Bill 124 also targets sectors that are predominantly worked by women, raising significant concerns that our Section 15 rights to equal protection and benefit of the law have been violated.
The province dismisses any suggestion that Bill 124 is discriminatory. With staffing crunches in hospitals and rotating closures, unions see the legislation as a roadblock to care.
Taking away the rights and freedoms of workers to bargain at fair wage increases is not only unconstitutional, but it's pouring fire on the health human resources crisis in Ontario.
The province thinks the court should stay out of this, that it's a matter of politics, not the law.
Pomp and ceremony at the Ontario Legislature as the province officially recognizes King Charles III as the head of state.
Therefore, I, and with the advice of His Majesty's Executive Council of the Province of Ontario, proclaim that upon the death of our late beloved sovereign, the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George, lawfully succeeded to the crown as Charles III.
Ontario's Lieutenant Governor Elizabeth Dowdeswell and Premier Doug Ford were on hand for the historic proclamation at Queen's Park. Dowdeswell signed the official proclamation before those gathered sang, "God Save the King." The legislature will resume Wednesday afternoon to pay tribute to the Queen. Anyone in the province over 18 can now book a shot to get a vaccine targeting both strains of the Omicron variant. Priority appointments begin today for vulnerable populations, which include long-term care residents and people 70 and up. People who don't fall under that category can still make a booking, but they won't be able to get their vaccine until September 26th. The booster is an adapted version of the original Moderna's mRNA vaccine. Ontario received its first shipments last week. Thunder Bay OPP continued to investigate a transport crash on Highway 102 this weekend. The mishap occurred near Intola Road at around 8:30 Saturday night. The driver somehow lost control, causing the transport to flip over into the ditch. The driver was taken to hospital with neck injuries, but was treated and released. OPP say there were no other vehicles involved and the westbound lane had to be temporarily closed to traffic. Towing equipment was on scene this morning preparing to remove the damaged vehicle. No charges have been laid as of yet, but OPP say the transport operator is likely facing a charge of careless driving. The lone Conservative MP in Northwestern Ontario, Eric Melillo, says he's excited about the federal party's new leader, as Pierre Poilievre dominated the other 4 candidates at this weekend's leadership convention. After a 7-month campaign, Poilievre secured a victory on the first ballot Saturday night, receiving 68% of the ballots and far outpacing runner-up Jean Charest, who received 16% of the vote. Melillo previously said he would be backing Parry Sound MP Scott Aitchison for the leadership, but would support Poilievre if he won. And now that the battle is over, Melillo says he's eager to work alongside Poilievre.
I think Pierre had a great campaign. He brought in thousands of party members into our movement and showed such a strong result, something that we haven't seen in our party or I think any political party in quite some time, such a dominant win. So I think that it's great to see that his message is certainly resonating with people and that he seems to be talking about the issues that matter to Canadians.
Poilievre was here in Thunder Bay at a public event in late May as part of his leadership campaign. We'll have more on the new Conservative leader coming up a little later on in the news hour. The tractors and plows were the feature attraction in Slate River this past weekend for the annual Rural Heritage Days. The popular event on Highway 130 drew hundreds of people to experience the rich history of the agricultural section in Thunder Bay. Jonathan Wilson was there and files this report.
Everything from bagpipes to hand plows can be seen at Rural Heritage Days here in the Slate River Valley. The event had to be scaled back the past couple of years due to the pandemic, but it was back in full force this past weekend. The president of the Rural Heritage Agricultural Society, Leo Bleckenhorst, says they were expecting close to 1,000 people to come see all the attractions on Saturday afternoon, including a tractor rodeo.
We did have an event, a limited event for the last 2 years. With COVID, so we carried on with the plowing because we started in 1927, so it was pretty much consecutive except for the war. So we carried on the actual plowing event through COVID, and now we're back to our first full-fledged event again.
The Slate River plowing match looks much like it has for the past 95 years, with competitors showing off their skills in plowing the fields in perfectly straight rows. There's a variety of categories in the competition, with some people bringing their grandfather's old tractors and plows to help showcase the history of this unique skill set.
Well, the plowing competition, there's a number of classes depending on the type of tractor, plows and whatnot, and we have a judge that comes in from out of town that actually judges each plowing plot, and then there are competitions for these various classes, and then there's points awarded, and at the end of it all, someone's a grand champion.
Along with the antique tractors, the event also featured some vintage cars, along with cows and other livestock for the kids to try feeding. Bleckenhorst says it's important to have events like this to raise awareness about all the agricultural activities in Oliver Papoonge and other parts of the rural Thunder Bay area, and the large number of people involved in farming. And there's just something about this old-fashioned event that attracts people of all ages.
A little bit of everything, but mostly the historic aspect probably with the antique equipment, antique demonstrations and so on. And in this case now, finally people getting together to, see each other in person after a long time.
Jonathan Wilson, TBT News.
Well, Fiona, today is a beautiful day to start the work